Hi, and welcome to another edition of Studio 411. I'm your host, Larry De Silva. Well, it's always a good omen when you're either driving around or driving to the studio and you hear something that reminds you of your next program. In this case, our next guest. The other day I'm driving and I hear a couple of tunes actually back to back. Must have been Double Play Tuesday. I hear the well-known singer, songwriter, musician Joe Walsh, a couple of his numbers, Rocky Mountain Way, and another one of his tunes that right now escapes my memory. But then I said, wow, that's a good omen, because we've got a young lady here who has written a book that details her almost 7-year-long relationship with the musician Joe Walsh. Kristin Casey is the author, has written a book called Rock Monster, My Life with Joe Walsh, set in the late 80s, early 90s, some of Walsh's darkest years, from spiraling addiction to a stunning comeback with the Eagles, who, of course, he had joined in the mid-'70s on their Hell Freezes Over tour. We welcome our guest, Kristin Casey, joining us from Texas. Kristen, welcome to the program.
Hi, glad to be here.
So tell me now, fill the folks in. When they hear the term rock monster, they think perhaps maybe not the nicest things, but actually fill us in where the title of the book comes from.
Okay, well, Rock Monster was my working title, and I never really intended for it to be used. And when I asked my publisher, right before, it was time to print the book, what are we changing the title to? He said, I love Rock Monster. What are you talking about? And so that's what we went with. But yeah, most people don't really realize that it's really a play on words, and that the word monster doesn't mean what you would think it means. So Monster was Joe's and my pet name for each other, and what it meant was basically like party monster. And so if we had gone overboard and gone on like a 3-day Coke binge or whatever, we might look at each other and say, you're a monster. God, we really monstered this weekend. And so, it was a term of affection, and also just sort of acknowledgement of our outrageousness. But it was just our pet name. And then, of course, he's a rock star, so Rock Monster could apply to him in that way. But more than that, towards the end of the book, as you know, I got into, my Coke addiction escalated to a crack addiction, and I was like constantly cooking and smoking crack rocks. And so actually the title is about me as the Rock Monster, but it's mostly just a play on words.
Now, what motivated you to write the book? Again, amazing to me, because did you write journals throughout the relationship? Because again, given what was the overall theme of the book, with a lot of drugs, sex, and rock and roll, your amazing recollection. So I'm wondering, did you keep journals during that time?
Yeah, I did, definitely. My recollection, I think my recollection is rather exceptional for some of those scenes. Anything really impactful, and that whole relationship, or so much of it was impactful, that some of the really joyful times and some of the really painful times just sort of got implanted in my head, or frozen in my head almost. But for the most part, I kept not only journals for the first half of our relationship quite a bit, fairly regularly. The second half, less and less so. But between my journals and, of course, the photographs, which were great triggers for my memory, because like everyone is the way they are with cell phones and selfies and taking pictures of everything these days. Well, that's what Joe and I were like with Polaroids and throwaway cameras, and I think I had a 35 millimeter that we used once in a while. So yeah, we took pictures all the time, and I've got like 10 photo albums or so, and between those and my journals, it really helped jog my memory, and it also helped me keep some of those stories in chronological order, because there were times I didn't know, did this particular road trip or this particular fight or this particular proposal happen, in what year. And I could tell just by the photographs, like what hairstyle I had or how skinny I was, when some of the stuff happened. And it wasn't a big deal, but just, I wanted things to be as precise and factual as humanly possible. That was really important to me. I didn't I didn't guess or make up or fudge stuff to make it fit or to get my points across or anything. I just wanted to tell my story very factually, and chronologically was important as well.
There you go. Kristin Casey, author of the book Rock Monster, My Life with Joe Walsh, published by Rare Bird Books. Not one, but two websites, KristinCaseyAuthor.com. That's Kristen with an I-N, not an E-N, and also rarebirdbooks.com. All right, we're having a little technical trouble with her feed, but as long as we can hear her, we've got plenty of Polaroids, 35 millimeters, and other photographs to take us along on our journey. Now, filming, and now you are not a native of Texas. You were born in California?
I was born in San Diego. I lived there for the first almost 16 years of my life.
Oh, so yeah, okay, longer than I realized. So now, how did you then wind up going to Texas? You were obviously still in school at that point. Was that your parents, for whatever reason, had to move to Texas?
Yeah, actually, and it was sort of a pivotal moment for me. I was just about to turn 16, and my father had a bankruptcy. There was some issues with the side business he had started, and so it was all very sudden. You know, we'd spent my 15 years, my parents started out small, and every 5 years or so we'd move up a little bit, and so, you know, as a 15-year-old, they didn't really have a much concept of our finances, or, you know, I felt like we had this lovely home and it was a stable life. And then all of a sudden overnight, everything was taken away. And I was told we're moving to Texas because he had he was in real estate and he had some business there that he was going to help him start over from scratch. So we all up and moved. And, you know, at the time I was insecure. I had a tense relationship with my mother to begin with. So it was, you know, and teen years are challenging anyway. So it was a very hard time to be uprooted. And I had just discovered alcohol and its effects on my confidence and my ability to talk to boys and sort of feel good about myself. And so I hadn't ever, I drank at high school dances, basically. I was dabbling, but as soon as the move happened, my drinking escalated severely because I was just so depressed. You know, we lived in an entirely different type of house and neighborhood, and I really did not fit in the panhandle of Texas whatsoever. So that's kind of what escalated that was the catalyst that really kicked in my alcoholism.
How would you describe yourself? You already did a little bit, but in other words, how would you describe yourself leading into the early part of this book versus how would you describe yourself now, other than the fact that you're a recovering alcoholic and drug abuser? Those aside, how would you kind of, you know, pit young Kristen and older Kristen?
Oh, good God, that's such a good question. Okay, so I would say that I'm very different, but in some ways I'm very much the same. The girl that Joe met at age 20 was someone who was a little bit I was late coming into my own because I had learned to deal with my problems through drinking and some drugs in my mid-teens and late teens. And so there's a certain amount of maturing that just didn't get to take place. So around the time I was 20, I had quit hard drugs. I'd had a really bad experience with meth. And so thankfully it was quick. It was a quick hard spiral. And I decided at around the age of 18, 19, 20 that I really wanted to get my act together and figure out who I was. And that's what I did up until the age of 20 when I met Joe. And who that person was someone who really was an ambitious and creative person. I really wanted to be a writer. You know, I wasn't someone who was looking to settle down and have kids and a family. I wanted an adventurous life. I was a sexual person, and I was really just learning to explore that and embrace that and figure all that out. And I partly was doing that through my job in a strip club. good or bad. You know, it was an adventure, and it was helping me figure out who I was. So I was a little quirky, I was a little cerebral, I was highly sexual, and I was very ambitious and creative. And I was just starting to write a few short stories, and timidly, and learning to make friends and sort of be a little bit more confident. And that's when I met Joe. And then shortly after that, I started letting go of those goals and my dreams of being a writer. And my sexuality sort of got pigeonholed in that relationship. And all these things that sort of defined me, that I had just started coming to embrace as my authentic identity, were little by little through that relationship, through no fault of Joe's specifically. It's just that happens in relationships, particularly when you're young, and especially when you're with someone who has such a sort of powerful presence and powerful life and a big life. It was just the circumstances of the situation. So I would say the person I am now is someone who has reintegrated all of that stuff, all the stuff that I lost in that relationship. I'm someone who's very confident, very able to make friends. I'm still just as highly sexual, but I'm very confident and in who I am in that regard. And I'm very, I'm an active writer. I'm a published writer. I've spent the last 10 or 20 years really plugging away at that and growing in confidence in that way. And I'm still just as, quirky and cerebral and probably, I would say, political, and also, there was something else.
She's more forgetful now, but that happens to all of us.
Yeah, I'm definitely more forgetful. Yeah.
Like I'm told, what did you have for dinner? I had no idea. So anyway, I have to show you. I don't know. Kristen can't see it right now, but we have this. Someone had left this in the studio, and I said, it does have blonde hair, but we'll call it strawberry blonde. So this is our. If we put that next to the image that's on the screen, that's our Kristen Casey doll for today. So I just thought, so when she sees that, then of course I will get a very nasty text, I'm sure, but that's okay.
Yeah, I can't wait to see that.
I'm comfortable in her confidence and her abilities. So there you go. So that's our doll. So we're not even selling that today. So we'll take good care of that. All right, Kristen Casey, author, and by the way, Kristen is a licensed sex therapist, so believe me, we're already planning some other appearances for her, along with some past guests who dabble in relationship field. So again, she's a very busy lady.
I'm actually, if I could interrupt,
Sure.
I'm not a licensed sex therapist, although I do work in the field of sex therapy. My area is sort of a niche modality within the field of sex therapy.
Okay.
So, there's a certain level of training that I got and certification, but just not the exact sex therapy licensing that you think of when you go to a sex therapist.
Very good.
It's similar, and I work with a lot of sex therapists.
And we'll certainly cover that at length another time. You get fixed up with Joe Walsh in Texas, which, by the way, now correct me if I'm wrong, you do live in Texas now. So the panhandle that you spoke of that was difficult to kind of adapt to from San Diego, California, has become your home and was your home during and even after you broke up with Joe. So you have become kind of a Texas girl without even realizing it.
Well, yes and no. I live in Austin. I lived in the Panhandle for 2 years, and then I came to Austin for college, and this is where I was living when I met Joe. And so I lived in Austin for the first 2.5 years of our relationship, although I was on the road with him for 2/3 of that time. And then when I moved in with him, we lived together in LA in the house that he had bought me in LA, and we lived there together for about 2.5 years. And then I moved to Vegas when we broke up the first time, and then we got back together and did the long distance thing again for about a year, and talked about me moving back in, but in truth, he was really just sort of drifting away. And so when we broke up the second time, I was in Vegas, and I stayed there for another 4 years, I guess. I was in Vegas for a total of 5 years. And shortly after I got sober, which was in Vegas, I realized, it was time to settle down. I wanted to buy a home. And I looked around and realized I wasn't home, that Austin was home. So I came back, and I've been back for 20 years now. Austin is home.
And I have to ask, since you brought it up, I just read an article recently that Austin is really a very hip and happening music town. So would you agree with that?
Oh yeah, without a doubt.
Yeah,
Without a doubt.
yeah. You think it was
We're known as the live music capital of the world. You know, partly because of the festivals, and but yeah, definitely.
Yeah. No, I just wanted to throw that in. I saw that and I thought of you, and I said I've got to remember to ask, because a lot of folks. Matter of fact, we have a quote regarding Kristen's book. This ain't no fanboy account. A gentleman by the name of Adam Slowpoke Temple, who's an Austin guitarist with a band called the Scabs. It's the genuine lived experience of Walsh's most intimate relationship. And while you're there, check out the pictures. Walsh may be crazy, but he ain't that crazy. And again, that Adam Slowpoke Temple, Austin guitarist with the Scabs, with this endorsement of the book, My Life with Joe Walsh, Rock Monster. Again, as I said, interesting time. You know, one thing when I was reading the book, and I said, I've got to ask her this, there were large chunks of time, not so much after you guys moved in together, but try to kind of impress on maybe the youth of today. You're with a musician. That in itself brings certain difficulties or baggage. Then you're at a time in the late 80s, early 90s where we don't have Instagram, cell phone, texting. So kind of convey to the youth of today, if you would, you know, how different that time is versus if you were in the same relationship today.
Well,
I don't know if it would help the relationship or would have sped up the demise of the relationship. I'm just tossing that out to you.
Well, I think, you know, long-distance relationships, regardless of whether one person is a rock star and traveling the world, long-distance relationships, I think, are tough. And so with Joe and I, one of the challenges of our relationship was that it was always feast or famine. Our time together was either, you know, 7 days joined at the hip and 2 weeks completely apart, only connected by a phone call. You know, like we could leave each other messages on voicemail, but we couldn't text or instant message or video chat or anything. So the times we were apart felt more apart than I think they would by far in today's world. It was hard as someone who was, you know, really in love for the first time. You know, I thought he was my soulmate. He was the love of my life, and I knew he was a rock star. And while he wasn't a, you know, a super playboy, you know, women really liked him. And so early in the relationship, it was kind of hard on me. And so a lot of jealousies would creep in. I kept it under control, I think, pretty much, but it was just a little bit harder. I think it was harder being together, joined to the hip for 1 or 2 or 3 weeks at a time, because, you know, you end up getting on each other's nerves and fighting and bickering a little bit more. But for the most part, I think the bonus, the best side, you know, the plus side is that, you know, we were outrageous. We were nuts. So that I spent more time cutting up Polaroids, standing over a trash can because we didn't have a shredder, cutting up Polaroids so that the evidence of our ridiculous parties and you know, cocaine bitches would be in the trash. And nobody ever saw me at my worst. Just, you know, nobody, there was no recorded evidence, you know, vicious raging emails that we sent fighting to each other, because we didn't have that. If we were yelling at each other, it was either face to face or over the phone, and there's no paper trail, there's no evidence, there's no pictures.
So the evidence we do have is really the PG, which is kind of funny in its own way.
Yeah,
believe me,
yeah.
it certainly conveys what's in the book, if you know what I mean. We've got a shot here that, again, I joked with her when we first had a few discussions about doing the show. I love how almost in every shot, if not a drink, there is a cigarette in her hand. Now, are you still a smoker today?
No, I quit that 6 months after I quit drinking.
Okay.
And I have to say, quitting drinking was literally the hardest thing I ever did. There's nothing I could compare it to. But once I had done it, you know, within a week or so, things started getting better, and I started feeling better. You know, so it was I knew every day I'd made the right decision and I just would power through. But man, when I quit smoking, it was like every day for the next 2 or 3 years, I could have picked it back up again like that. That was a tough addiction to quit.
But I get
Cigarettes.
the impression with all your different, even from your dabbling with meth back in your teen years, that again, until you hit, the crack, the other ones seemed more effortless in terms of giving up. I get what you're saying about the drinking. And I was going to say, I didn't know if you still occasionally had a cocktail, et cetera. But the other one, once they got on the crack, which kind of crept up on me as I was reading the book, like, wow, now she's like, going to another level. I mean, there are people far stronger than you, in my opinion, that, wouldn't be here talking with me today. I mean, I think it's remarkable in some ways. I don't know if you just have a bunch of angels looking out for you, but it's amazing to me that you were still here.
Well, it's amazing to me too, actually. I do believe I was born genetically with a ridiculously strong constitution. And in fact, I had a doctor tell me that. He said he thinks I have the strongest constitution of any patient he's ever had. He said, you should definitely be dead. And I agree. So I think some of it was luck and some of it was, I don't know. I just have physically, I just managed to persevere through it. The meth and the coke and the crack were all easier to quit, given the right incentive. I mean, granted, it took, a violent episode to quit the crack, being beaten up. It took, to quit the meth, I was beaten up and robbed and abducted. I was mugged and abducted for a couple of hours. So something really significant had to happen before I sort of awoke to the reality of the situation and went, what am I doing with these drugs? And with the alcohol, it was different. I really slipped into a very delusional state, but that's the nature of alcoholism. And alcohol was my first love. Alcohol was what I started using at 14 and 15, and it was immediately my solution to life. And I drank from 14 to 29 for 15 years, almost daily. And, so I was physically addicted to it. In fact, when I quit drinking and I detoxed, I didn't go to a detox. I just detoxed at home or at my friend's home. And, you can die from alcohol detox. So it was crazy. But and when I quit meth and when I quit coke and crack, I had the alcohol to fall back on. When I quit alcohol, I had nothing to fall back on. Cigarettes weren't doing it.
Yeah.
So that's partly why it was, because I was getting truly sober, truly clean and sober, not just getting off one drug and upping my alcohol intake or something. I was clean off everything. So it was, it was much more difficult.
We've got a shot here of Joe Walsh, Kristen, and her younger sister there. Of course, in many ways, I got from the book has been a little bit more of a rock, no pun intended, than perhaps even your parents or others were in your life. Because you know how it is when sometimes times are tough, not just physical, mental situations. Could be something just a problem in life you're having, and sometimes you know who your true friends are, whatever, or sometimes you realize you don't really have a lot of true friends as well. That could be the case as well. But she certainly, it seems like you guys have a pretty good relationship. For those, again, tuning in, Joe at this point, when you were 20, he was 40. So obviously that's I guess that would fall under a May-December or May-November romance, I guess. Or a leap year romance.
Go ahead.
A leap year romance, perhaps. I'm not sure, but what was it in him when you were introduced to him? Kind of set up in Texas when he was there on an appearance. Again, to those of us that love him as a musician, as a songwriter, a lot of people don't even think of him as that. They just think of him as kind of this goofy guy who's had quite a good run of success. But yet it's amazing. But actually, before I lead into the next comment, looking up whether it's Wikipedia or any of the social media sites or internet sites, it's amazing. This block of time, this 6 or 7 years, it just goes to show you, no matter what information you have online or you think you know somebody, this block is like almost like not even covered until this book came out.
Yeah, I noticed that too.
And it's amazing that, to jump ahead, there was one point in time where you guys had really, finally ended it. Although you did see him in terms of, casually to say hello and wish each other well. But there was one point in time that to me had to have hurt, where someone that you knew claimed they knew him, and then when they approached him about you, maybe he was with the wrong people or whatever, but basically claimed that, oh, we never were, she was never my girlfriend. And I just wondered if you ever got a sense, where did that come from? Or was that just maybe he was with another female, so he didn't want to admit to it?
I had a sense back then, and it hasn't changed as to why he said that.
Okay.
Yeah, so what happened was I was working at the Crazy Horse 2 as a stripper in Vegas, and I worked with a girl named Jennifer, and I did not name drop Joe's name. I didn't normally, have never really, there are people who've known me for years, for decades, who didn't know that I was in a relationship with Joe until the book came out, actually. But at the time, I was really on a downswing. I mean, it was the last 2 years of my drinking after Joe's and my final breakup were really, really dark. I was purposely trying to drink myself to death. So I was just in a very dark place. And I kind of started looking like it eventually. My face was getting a little bloated. I was passing out in the dressing room. I mean, I just looked like someone who was a bit of a mess and definitely an alcoholic. So this girl, Jennifer, we were just chatting one day, and I think I forget how it came up, but I might have wanted to boost my status in the club, or maybe I was just feeling sentimental. And the truth is, I was in a relationship with him, and his name or the name of the Eagles came up in conversation, and I just mentioned, I used to live with Joe while we were engaged, and she didn't believe me. She was just, she thought, this sort of drunk urchin girl, and so she didn't say anything, but she fact-checked my claim, and I'd kind of forgotten about it. And a week later or so, she gets back to me and says, well, I know someone who knows someone who knows him, and I had them ask him, and he said that you didn't date, that you were just a sweet girl, but just a big fan. And I know at the time it was devastating. It was just like the wind got knocked out of me, because I just felt betrayed, and like the only thing I had at the time were my memories, and now I wasn't even allowed to share those, and it was, but I also know this. Joe was at the time in early sobriety. I mean, he probably had a year sober or something like that, or 2 years maybe. And, he was back at this high status in the public eye. And I think he probably had a knee-jerk reaction that he didn't want to be associated publicly with someone who was not doing so well. And, I don't know if he ever regretted that comment. My entire world was work. My entire world was trying to maintain a halfway decent reputation in this tiny little sphere of work that I went to every day, because it was all I really had. So it didn't put me in a very good light. It ended up making me look like a delusional drunk versus just a regular drunk.
Yeah.
But I also understood, I don't think it's something he would do again. But I just think I was an embarrassment, to be honest. I think I was an embarrassment to him, and he probably was enjoying his rock star status again and wasn't thinking about how much that might hurt me. That's my guess. And again, that's a guess. We never talked about it. I never asked him about it.
We've got a shot here on the monitor of Joe. At this point, Kristen was in Joe's life. Joe was involved with I think the inaugural Ringo Starr's All-Star Band. I may miss a few, but I know second from left is the late Levon Helm, a gentleman with the beard and the bandana, Dr. John, the late Rick Danko, Joe Walsh to his right, the late Billy Preston. Bottom row, Nils Lofgren, a well-known singer-songwriter, also works with Bruce Springsteen. Of course, Mr. Ringo Starr. And to his right, or his left rather, the late Clarence Clemons. So quite a group of individuals. We'll talk a little bit about them throughout the remaining hour that we have. But again, a nice gig, outstanding musicians, probably one of the better lineups that Ringo had throughout the 30 years or so that he's been doing that. Let's talk a little bit about Joe again as a performer. He comes across in the book as very intent and intense on the next lyric idea, guitar riff. I mean, it seems like he's constantly with a guitar in hand, piano. I mean, I think that's great. Obviously, that shows that, to me, in some ways, he's like you are now, very intense, very focused on the next project. I don't know, would you call him a perfectionist or just someone striving for the unattainable at times?
As far as his songwriting and his music?
Yeah, just, constantly always, with the guitar at the piano. I mean, it just seems like very, very much almost overly focused on, or was it just a period in his time where maybe he hit a rough patch like many musicians or people in general do, where they just can't seem to get the next idea, the next riff, the next hook that they want to use?
With Joe, I think that at the piano or with a guitar in hand, whether he was sitting on a floor playing for me and a couple of my friends or in front of, tens of thousands of fans, I think that's his happy place. I think that's where he probably feels the most at home and authentic. And, again, I can't speak for him, but that was definitely the sense I always had, was that, he got his start pretty young and he had success at a pretty young age. And, I think he experienced, he's amazingly talented. I mean, let's just say that. The guy was born to play guitar, and his songwriting, some of it's just brilliant. The years that I was with him, things were different, especially with the songwriting. He was struggling, but also with his performances. There were times where he would forget the words to songs, and he was still one of the best guys out there on stage. But since he got sober, he's gotten better and better. The man has got to be 70 years old this year, and his singing and his playing are just continually getting better. I mean, he's just a master, and I think that's part of who he is. That's, that he lives and breathes his music. And it's funny because in our relationship, when I first met him and fell in love with him, I didn't know who he was. I knew he was a guy who had a hit or two in the 70s, and I just sort of assumed he was probably some one-hit wonder. I had no idea who he was until I'd already fallen in love with him and went to the concert the next day. And he started playing, and I started recognizing song after song, and I was like, oh my God, this guy's a real rock star.
You're like, I'm with him?
Yeah. Well, actually, I was thinking, I'm with him, but then he's never going to call me. I'm surely a one-night stand. This guy is huge, and rock stars this huge probably have a girl. I was thinking we're going to be together forever, literally from the first night. And then I realized he was a rock star the next day, and I thought, well, now he's never going to call me, and I was just devastated. Thankfully, he did. But I forget what I was saying about that, but. The years that we were together, his addictions, he'd been maintaining and doing really well. Some people are more functional when they're using, and with his massive talent, he was doing fine for a long time. And then eventually it will get to you, though. So he'd been using for 20 years by the time we got together. And so it had started to affect his creativity and his songwriting and his playing. And I saw that because after we met and he did that show, and then they went out on tour, and he was calling me, and we were starting a relationship. I was also researching him. I couldn't go online; there was no Wikipedia, but I went to the record store and bought everything with his name on it. And that's when I started seeing him as this rock star. And all of a sudden, I wasn't even able. I was almost. I had that sort of gushy fan feeling when I would talk to him on the phone, and I had to kind of get my head straight about that. But the years we were together were the years that his records were not selling as well, and so I saw it happening. I saw him struggling. I saw him struggling to write. I would watch him write, and I saw it being very stressful and more of a chore. But that's the nature of addiction, and that's the thing. I'm a writer, and I wrote a few things, not much, before I started using heavy drugs. The whole time we were together, I don't think I wrote a decent page on anything. And it wasn't until I got completely clean and sober that my creative self started, coming out. And I think it was in some ways the same for him. I think he had a good 20-year run, but the cocaine eventually took its toll on his writing and creativity.
Kristen Casey joining us for the hour. The book Rock Monster, My Life with Joe Walsh, published by Rare Bird Books. For more information, KristenCaseyAuthor.com and also RareBirdBooks.com. We've got a photo. We'll start with her. Kind of short answer on these. Just kind of give the audience as well as myself your kind of take on some of these people. There was an image a minute or so ago with John Entwistle. Nice person?
Oh, he was lovely. And I didn't realize at first because he was so quiet. I thought that he was kind of snobby, but in truth, as soon as he had a few drinks, he was just so sweet and affectionate and silly and boyish. I just adored John. He was wonderful. Yeah, and Joe did too. They were good friends.
Billy Preston, I get a thing in the book, tell me if I'm right. Was there something about Billy perhaps that the general public didn't know, or did I misinterpret what was said in the book?
You're good.
Okay.
Well, I didn't realize that I had not heard of Billy I hadn't heard of most of those musicians really until I met them. But it quickly became apparent to me, and insiders knew that Billy was gay, and so his wardrobe guy was his partner at the time. I mean, I don't know any details about his private life, but I do know that the man that he brought on tour with him, they had a special relationship, and Billy was wonderful. His music was amazing.
Marvelous musician. Loved his work for sure. We had a shot we're looking at. We had one before. I thought it was pretty interesting. Joe brings an ex-flame by the house. I guess Joe at one time, Stevie Nicks, Fleetwood Mac, obviously a tremendous solo artist in her own right, came to where you guys were staying, and you couldn't get rid of her. And she had a little bauble on her neck, and apparently, as I learned, that's where a lot of folks keep their stash.
Yeah, I honestly, I will say that it does look like a Coke vial, but in my memory, it's actually, the pictures aren't so clear that I can tell, but I'm almost positive that's a crystal. She, because I have a very strong memory of being surprised that I never saw her do a single line all night, because she was so talkative and kind of ditzy, and that kept getting worse and worse as the night went on. And I thought, I've never seen anyone talk so much who wasn't actively doing blow. But I had been with her for 2 hours at dinner, on the way to the house, and then for hours at home, so like 6 or 8 hours straight. And I never saw her do a single line. But she was very, very talkative and scattered. And then when she sat down at the piano, the rest of us ceased to exist. And nothing I said or did, no hint was strong enough to get her to get up and leave until like 4:30 in the morning. We had to trick her to get her out of the house. And let me just say, I adore her. I adored every minute she was there. But she just, she didn't get the hint. It was kind of the guest who wouldn't leave. Yeah.
There was a shot we just had, and this is just my opinion, no one else's. A shot that says Hawaii 1990. That to me is early in the relationship, but to me that's the best photo, and it doesn't look like a Polaroid. Looked like it was professionally with a 35 millimeter. That's the best shot of you two. So I'm going to assume that's probably much happier times.
Yeah, that was one of our best trips. I journaled about that specific trip to Hawaii, and just every minute of it, it was like a honeymoon. It was was just like a dream come true. We were so in love. We were so in sync. You know, that might have been some of the happiest few days of my life, truly. And that was, you know, one of those professional photographers going around the restaurant asking if they can take a picture of you, and that's what we got. Yeah.
Now, do you think that the relationship would have lasted longer or shorter if, throughout that, we'll say 5 to 7 year period, if you guys had been in a straighter frame of mind?
Oh, we would have lasted a lot longer. We would have. I tell you this, I don't know if we'd be divorced, but we would probably be divorced. We would have gotten married, I think, and we would have probably lasted for a long time, and we would very likely have ended up divorced. And the reason is that I'm not really wired to be the partner of a rock star. I have my own creative ambitions, and I think when you have two people who are so creative, sometimes it's really difficult. What Joe needs is what most creative people, especially at his level, really benefit from is having a partner who's really there as their support system, a real nurturer, somebody who's really a partner in their career. You know what I mean? And, you know, I was not going to spread my wings and soar my own way until I went my own way. And, you know, to this day, I consider Joe the love of my life and my soulmate. You know, I mean, we have a very strong connection, and we've always loved each other. That's never changed. But I was put on this earth to do something, and it wasn't to take care of someone else. It was to express my creativity and to be a writer.
Now, one thing that Stevie was very good for you anyway, was, I guess, interesting turn of events. I guess she might have perhaps put on a little weight or whatever. So then Joe, being the good-hearted soul that he was, he got a bunch of her outfits and said, hey, my lady can use those. So you're wearing like Stevie Nicks' old, probably 80s costumes. Very nice. I was busy looking at the Route 66 sign myself, but then I realized that you were there with Stevie's clothes on. Pretty good, pretty good.
Yeah, she had. I mean, who didn't want to raid Stevie's wardrobe? The first time I saw her on MTV, I thought, you know, that's like a dream come true, and it actually happened. It was nuts. Yeah, gorgeous stuff.
Yeah, see, and here you go. See, I'm holding up the doll again. You see that? There you go. You see that? If you hold the two side by side, you get the picture. There you go.
So, are you going to do my merchandising for me? I hadn't thought about doing merchandising with the book, but apparently you've got a doll.
Oh, I'm multi-talented.
All right, we'll talk. We'll talk.
Oh my goodness. Yes. So on that note, we have a quote from Mark Elliott as he exits stage right, a New York Times best-selling author, about the book My Life with Joe Walsh, Rock Monster. A quote, "No vantage point is better than the one on the inside. Casey was on the front lines of one of rock's most decadent eras. She tells her story with a skill and detail that would stay with the reader for a very long time," unquote. Mark Elliott, New York Times best-selling author. And again, for your first effort in terms of, you know, in book form, again, this is why usually when books like this come out, usually it's, you know, Jane Doe or John Doe with so-and-so. Again, you know, they kind of have the stories and then they kind of put it together. You really have quite a talent. So again, I certainly hope that we'll be, you know, seeing more, you know, from you in terms of, you know, books and articles in the not too distant future.
Yes,
we've got a shot here. I have to ask because again, Joe kind of bobbed and weaved with so many people, and again with the celebrities, we'll keep the, you know, the short answer here. A shot with the late John Candy. Nice man.
Oh, he was the best. He was such a sweetheart. Best hugger in the world. Funny as hysterical. Yeah, great guy. Loved Joe. They adored each other.
I have to ask this one. This one caught me totally by surprise. But then again, there was so much in the book that caught me by surprise. So I was like writing notes like I thought I was writing my own book. But anyway, Patrick Swayze. Now, was he a neighbor of you guys at one point?
Well, not technically, but he owned the house next door. One day, Joe and I were just driving home at Blairwood, and we see Patrick Swayze standing in the driveway of the house next door. So we get out and go introduce ourselves. He had just finished Point Break, and so he had blondish hair, was super tan. I think he had bought it as like a flip. like he was gonna rehab it and flip it or something. He didn't live there, but we invited him over. Said come over anytime. And so one night I'm away at my parents or something, and he comes over and hangs out all night and like writes songs with Joe, and they record in the home studio. And I missed the whole thing.
Wow, wow! I'd love to know where those tracks went. My goodness,
I know, right?
Yeah.
Me too.
Yeah,
Me too. I don't
absolutely.
even remember if I heard him.
Oh yeah.
Such a sweetie.
Now,
Sweetheart.
I'll tell you something. As a man, let's see, on number 2 marriage, if you catch where I'm going, is one thing I've always been told is when it comes to gift giving, one of the worst things you can do is no appliances, no pots and pans. So then when I read that, and I think you know where I'm going with this, one of the worst gifts you could possibly give a woman. Do you remember what that was?
No, honestly, I don't.
He gave you a sewing machine.
No, I do.
He gave you a
seriously.
sewing machine.
This is, it just boggles the mind. He gave me a toilet seat. And
Oh, no, I was going to bring that up later. That's a classic. You had renovated a room. That's even worse than the sewing machine. You renovated a room and painted it like kind of a greenish color. And then he, again, lovely guy. He's got to be like the salt of the earth. But he gets you a toilet seat, a used toilet seat from the place called the Record Plant, which is a famous recording studio that supposedly Hendrix and other people sat on. Now, you know what?
Yeah, and it didn't go with my pastel decor whatsoever.
Yeah.
It was white and black with this sort of black etching design, but the white it was so old, the white had turned yellow, and I was just like, what? And he's like, Jimi Hendrix sat here. This is, he thought it was this amazing gift, and I'm like, okay. Honey.
And meanwhile, you have the pledge or the cleaning wipes, and you're trying to make sure you get any residue or any E. coli off of the seat. So we have a great shot of Joe again, man of many hats, literally and figuratively. I thought it was good. We just lost it. Zach Starkey, Ringo's kid, who of course is the drummer now for the Who, but. Amazing. Just an array of people that went through this house. I mean, you should, I think for your follow-up book, you should just tell stories, true stories about all these famous celebs, musicians. I just think, amazing stuff, amazing. Now, we have a photo here. This was after you and Joe broke up. This was you pretty much at your low point. You were in a tub, and again, at this point, you were at your low ebb, as they say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was in Las Vegas. I was on this mission from 95 to 97 to drink myself to death, and I had a very good friend. I don't write about him in the book. He just. It didn't necessarily serve the story, but he also just, I think, didn't want to be in it, so I didn't. But his name is Mark, and he was my best friend from high school onward. So he flew out to Vegas to visit, and, I was really trash, and he was taking pictures and trying to, I don't know, I think he was trying to be silly and make me laugh and bring back my old self. And so he jokingly posed me in the bathtub. But when the picture came out, it's a Polaroid. To me, it just was so perfect. This is kind of what I felt like. I felt like somebody had just sort of left me to sink down the drain or whatever. It was a posed shot, but it also was it encapsulated how I was feeling at that point in my life. So. Oh,
for sure. And then we just had a shot of you that was taken back in the late 90s after you had, kind of gotten a better hold on your life and a better place. So again, and this is a more recent shot of you. Again, obviously doing well. Again, there's so many stories in the book that there isn't enough hours in the day to cover. But again, it's a great book. RareBirdBooks.com, Kristen Casey, author.com, Rock Monster, My Life with Joe Walsh, Studio 411, Larry DeSilva here in the remaining moments with Kristen. Another funny story, 1992, you accompanied Joe. I remember this gig. You guys did the American Bandstand 40th anniversary special. And obviously at that point, Joe was, in need perhaps of a fix. And tell me very, very quickly, the Greg Allman was there, and that must have been like keeping two ravenous animals apart from each other.
Yeah, it took some skill. Greg's girlfriend and I had met backstage. There was a lot of her, sit around and wait when you're filming TV. So there were hours backstage, and everyone had their own dressing room. And she had pulled me aside and said, whatever you do, don't let Greg get near Joe, because Greg got out of rehab early yesterday, and he so wants a fix, and he knows Joe's holding because, clearly Joe always had coke on him. So we devised a plan to keep them apart. And no matter where Joe was, when Greg would come up to me and say, where's Joe? I would lie to him and send him on some goose chase, and we did that all day long. It was kind of funny, kind of sad, but we were very successful at it, and it passed the time backstage.
Indeed, indeed. We're looking at a shot of Kristen now in real time, again, doing well on the success of the book. If you don't mind me asking, when was within the last 10 years, when's the last time you either spoke to Joe or ran into him, to even say hello?
Well, the last time we saw each other in person or talked in person, he was playing in San Antonio in 2006. It was like a corporate gig or something, and he let me know he was in town. He was getting divorced, and he wanted to come spend the weekend with me. So I went down there, and it was just wonderful to see him. And we actually talked about dating again. Because he was getting divorced, and he was single and I was single, and we just still had that chemistry. But then within a couple of months, I had met someone else, and so it never happened. We continued to talk on the phone and email until 2011. He was in Austin, and he called and said, I've left you some tickets, but I can't see you because, I'm married now, and, which makes sense. So we just lost touch after that. So it's been like 7 years.
Any feedback regarding the book, especially like not negative in terms of the content, but again, so many of these folks have passed on, but the ones who are still around, including Joe, of course, that have something to say about it. I mean, does he even know that the book was put out?
Oh, I don't know.
Okay.
I mean, I have to assume so, but I haven't heard anything, and I hope he likes it, but whatever he thinks, I mean, it's probably complicated, and it's none of my business.
Sure.
I do hope he likes it. I hope that it brings back some good memories for him. But I don't expect to hear from him. I haven't heard. I've heard from some other people in the book, which has been fun. Even some small characters that I met once or twice have reached out, and that's been really fun. But nobody from Joe's camp.
There you go. Again, just as they say in the business, a real page turner. I'm telling you, just amazing. But I'm serious that again. You keep digging through those Polaroids and those 35 millimeters, because you've got stories to talk about with, in depth with, positive things, like even the thing you were telling me with Patrick Swayze, where, again, would love to get a hold of those audio recordings with Joe. That must have been something. I
mean, I'm posting pictures on Facebook. I've got enough pictures still to post to take me through the rest of the year. Every other day or so, I'll post some more pictures on my Facebook and Instagram, although I'm better on Facebook. So it's scenes, all of them are, most of them are scenes from the book. And it covers a whole 8 or 10 year period.
Absolutely. And there she is as we see her. Again, we've had a little bit of technical difficulty with the image, but luckily she's been joining us, as they say, via audio. So we've filled in nicely with some nice pictures. There's, as we wrap up the interview, there's a picture of them, I believe, in Switzerland. Again, more hats with that Joe, with piano keys. Amazing. I never saw a man wear so many hats. But Kristen.
Yeah, no, it was his thing. He would wear hats on hats on hats. Literally, there were hats. We had 100 minimum in the house at all times.
Amazing.
With more coming every day.
We all are hoarders. LPs, hats, whatever. We all collect things, and then we forget where we put them. Anyway, we thank Kristen Casey for joining us here for the hour on Studio 411. The book, Rock Monster, My Life with Joe Walsh, rarebirdbooks.com, as well as KristenCaseyAuthor.com. Just a pleasure to speak with Kristen, and you can be sure we'll be back on very soon to talk about some other stuff. So you hang in there with us, and we thank you folks for joining us here for the hour on Studio 411. Larry DeSilva is my name, and we will see you next time. Take care.